Welcome in, everyone, and thank you for listening to the 86th ever episode of the Missouri Sports Podcast, brought to you by 106 Apparel, and once again recording via Zoom in beautiful Springfield, Missouri. I'm one of your hosts, Cameron Howard, alongside my good friend and fellow Mizzou fan, Kyle DeVries. How are you doing today, Kyle?
I'm doing great today, Cameron. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yes, it truly was beautiful. It rained this morning in Springfield, but then cleared up. The sun is out right now. I sat in the hammock on the back porch a little bit after I got home from work, so
That sounds lovely.
can't ask for more than that.
You know, I actually live in Nixa, so you've been lying to everyone this whole time. So, and it just dawned on me that I don't actually live in Springfield, so
Wow,
it's a huge deal.
that is, and yeah, I'm thoroughly embarrassed now. I don't know if I can go on with the show now with that glaring mistake.
Yeah.
Kyle, we got some good news today. Finally, I think we'll talk about that and see how good a news we actually think it is. We can't have an episode of this without talking about basketball recruiting and transfers and things like that. And then we're going to take a deep dive into the NFL draft as it pertains to the Missouri Tigers. Look at the players we think have a chance of getting drafted, and we'll make some predictions for what round we think they're going to go in. And maybe if I can remember all the way back to football season, I'll try to give some analysis or something, some kind of fond memory of the player. But man, it feels like football season was a long time ago.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, we'll give you some notes and stuff on the guys that have a chance to be drafted. Obviously, I'm not a scout by any means, but you know, some stuff is definitely pretty obvious things that if you watch football, you can pick up on, and you can know are the strengths and weaknesses of the players. But hopefully, we have a little better draft for Mizzou players than we did last year. But at this point, who really knows? So.
Yeah, and obviously, spoiler alert for our predictions. We're going to be putting this out. We're recording this and putting this out as the first round of the NFL draft will be underway. So, needless to say, we're not predicting anybody to go in the first round, but you'll have this obviously now available to you in time to see what happens with the rest of the rounds and see where these Mizzou players end up. But before we do that, we have to talk basketball and basketball recruiting. And we will start it off with the big news of the day, and that is Mizzou landing a transfer commit by the name of Ed Chang. He transferred originally from San Diego State. Actually, if you take it all the way back, he was originally committed to Washington, I believe, then decommitted and signed with San Diego State, then basically got no playing time and struggled when he was on the court and transferred to a community college, and now he is coming to Mizzou.
Yeah, I think this was a guy that apparently Conzo Martin recruited when he was coming out of high school, and he stayed on the West Coast. Another classic example of a guy that has now committed to Missouri, and I have not heard of him before that happens. I know what the attitude is online, at least on Twitter, about this commitment. And at least initially, I can't say that I disagree with that attitude. Yeah, I mean, coming from a community college, we really didn't beat anybody out for him. He averaged 8 points a game, 3.5 rebounds for a community college.
Yeah, in 17 minutes per game. Didn't even start most of the games.
Yeah, that's extremely underwhelming for a guy that's going to be coming into an SEC level school. That's underwhelming for sure. Now you can still, I guess, make the argument potentially that he is still developing. You can see where he might be able to grow into a more consistent starter. He can shoot pretty well. He's 6'8". So you can definitely see the potential of but the production has not been there anywhere he's been in college so far.
Correct me if I'm wrong, still 3 years of eligibility remaining. I think he just used up the one at San Diego State.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how that works with his community college stop. So does he not use a year of eligibility for that?
No, typically you have an extra year built in for red shirt or uh, going down a level.
Okay.
Um, so he should be fine there. That shouldn't have used up any eligibility. So 3 years of eligibility. So basically, kind of stepping into the place of Trey Jackson. I mean, both listed at 6'8", both could shoot the ball or can shoot the ball fairly well, and coming into that same graduating class. So um, as far as the roster math, that's subtract 6'8" forward with 3 years remaining, gain a 6'8" forward with 3 years remaining. That aspect of it makes sense. But when you're taking and maybe Trey Jackson was more of a project than we would typically see out of a top 100 recruit, but there's no question that this guy is a project. And I would be pretty surprised if we saw meaningful contributions from him next season. But there is going to be playing time available kind of at the 3 or 4 spot, depending on what happens with that last scholarship this offseason. I don't know if he can maybe come in and spread the floor a little bit and actually make some shots, make some 3-pointers especially, then I could see him maybe having a little bit of a role next year. But one thing that was mentioned in an article I read about his year in San Diego State was that he had struggles on the defensive end. And I don't know, I feel like if you're going to give minutes to, somebody who's struggling on the defensive end, you should have just given them to Trey Jackson before giving them to somebody that, has really struggled to produce in college. So I don't even know if he's going to see much action because of the defensive struggles that he apparently has.
Yeah, with the way everything's gone this offseason so far, I totally understand where everybody's coming from at this point, where it's just like
Yeah.
everybody's pretty down, and I completely understand. So I agree. I don't think he's going to be providing meaningful minutes next season. Um, and I also agree with your comparison with Trey Jackson. I just don't understand why fundamentally there was not a better effort to try and get Trey Jackson minutes last season, because now I mean I don't know.
From the outside looking
We're
in,
scrambling.
yeah, from the outside looking in, I mean, everybody was saying, give Trey Jackson minutes. You're losing
Yeah.
games anyway. How would it hurt?
Yeah.
Get him some playing time. He's going to transfer. And then, the offseason comes and we go, please don't transfer. Please don't transfer. And then inevitably we get the news, and it was, we talked about it when it was announced. It wasn't shocking to anybody. And yeah.
And they didn't want him to transfer according to
Right.
reports. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay. So now we're left with a probably less athletic, maybe this guy can shoot a little bit better. Maybe Chang can shoot a little bit better than Trey Jackson, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
So with a lot of attractive options out there still, I think even though we've swung and missed on a lot of guys, I still think there's more attractive options out there of guys that have put together better production at a higher level than community college. So we'll see.
Yeah. And, we've talked about how the transfer market just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Obviously, players are committing elsewhere, but it seems like every day there's a new name that comes out that you're like, okay, that's intriguing. That could be a fit. That could provide some scoring. One guy, let me try to make this go in some kind of order here. One guy that Mizzou missed out on, his first name is Courvoisier, I believe is how you say that. Thanks to Google and YouTube for helping me attempt that pronunciation.
That was incredible.
Now, he was a D2 guy that looked like, he could provide some of the scoring that Missouri is looking for, but he ended up choosing DePaul.
Hmm.
And so that added to the Mizzou fans, and rightfully so, being like, okay, were we really going after this guy if we lost him to DePaul? Surely, you would hope not, but
They offered him.
yeah. So you never know what's going on there, but yeah, that is disappointing to miss out on a guy like that looked like he could be a scoring solution. Um, let's see here. So two transfers that Mizzou has offered that are, I believe, making decisions fairly soon and we've talked about both of them, are Drew Buggs and Jared Hyder.
Hmm.
Buggs has a final three of Mizzou, Iowa State, and Loyola Marymount. Do you know of a decision day for him? Has he put anything out there?
All I've seen is that he would probably be deciding this weekend.
Right.
So I don't know if there's been an actual date or time set, but probably in the next few days, by the time you're listening to this, we'll probably know fairly soon on Drew Buggs. And he is a guy that we talked about him last week a little bit. He's kind of a do everything guy for Hawaii. I think he's known as kind of a pass first guy, but he still averaged almost 10 points a game. He had over 5 assists a game and 4.5 rebounds a game. So, definitely a guy who definitely, at least just looking at those numbers, a guy that plays hard, incorporates the team. He's going to have 1 year to play. But I think that that's raised some concerns about Xavier Pinson. Is what's the status on him? Because clearly Xavier Pinson's going to be expected to come in and run the team next year. So why are we recruiting a point guard graduate transfer who has 1 year to play and run the team? So obviously we don't know anything on Pinson, if whether he's going to return to school or not. But the fact that,
And
we're
we
going
and
so
we won't know.
yeah, we won't know for a while. But the fact that we're going so hard after Bugs is a little bit concerning on the Xavier Pinson front for sure.
I would agree, unless they're looking at Bugs as like some type of insurance at the point guard spot. If
Or asking him
Xavier,
to play off the ball a little bit or something.
yeah, but yeah, the timing of that doesn't make sense for it to be insurance, because he's going to commit somewhere before Penson has to decide whether he's going to stay in the draft or not. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We've talked about it so many times, how impossible it is to try to get inside the minds of especially this basketball staff, to try to figure out what they're thinking with certain scenarios. But
Right.
um, seems like a talented guy. However, do we have enough guys that can make shots for him to pass to? I
Right.
don't. I don't
Right.
exactly know.
Seems redundant for sure.
Yeah. And then the other one, Jared Hyder. I have him down in my notes as committing this weekend as well.
Mm-hmm. Saturday.
Okay, cool. And was there a list of finalists there?
Yeah. So again, this is a guy we talked about a little bit last week, but he's kind of a point guard, shooting guard from Fresno State. He just finished his freshman year, about 9 points a game. So a guy who has played pretty well his freshman year, still has 3 years to go. He's a West Coast guy, so he's got Cal, Mizzou, St. Mary's, Washington State, and BYU in his top five. So definitely, if you're just comparing schools like basketball program to basketball program, it seems like Missouri's got a pretty good shot there. But I'm not sure geographically it makes sense with his life. I think
Right.
he's from California, and all of his other schools he's interested are West Coast. So I think he's one of the most attractive options that are left as far as guys that Missouri has a shot with. And we have with the addition of Ed Chang today. I think we have one scholarship left. I think I'd like to see Jared Hyder take that spot, but unless there's a more attractive option out there that we think we still have a shot at, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think Hyder makes perfect sense. We've talked about, having a guy that can kind of bridge the gap between, in theory, Xavier Pinson and then life beyond Xavier Pinson. So he would be able to accomplish that, unless if Pinson does come back, maybe he leaves after his junior year instead of after his sophomore year. You never know. Funny you mentioned BYU. I saw that the Purdue big man, I forget his name. He announced
Arms.
that, yeah, he's going to BYU and chose them over Kentucky. So it seemed like, of course, Kentucky was going to swoop in and get this highly touted transfer. It seems like they've done such a good job of complementing their 5-star, top 5 recruiting classes with a graduate transfer that can
Hmm.
kind of be a little bit of an anchor. So,
Yeah, Kentucky could be an interesting situation next year. It seems like, I mean, they've had a max exodus of guys going to the NBA this year,
as per
and
usual.
per usual, but it seems like they don't have as many guys maybe coming in yet or something. I don't know, but it definitely seems like things could be a little dicey for Kentucky on Kentucky standards next
Well, and
season. But
yeah, and talk about redundant. I mean, they've got like 6 players coming in that are like between 6'6" and 6'8",
yeah,
all forwards.
yeah,
So I don't know how they're gonna, and one of them being Cam Fletcher.
yeah. Cam Fletcher, come on down to Mizzou if you change your mind. I think he's signed with Kentucky at this
Oh
point. I
yeah,
think that's a
yeah,
pipe dream.
yeah. I mean,
Uh,
surely if he asked out of his letter of intent, they'd be like, "Yeah, we're probably fine." But
but Calipari is he is just an incredible coach, man. Yeah, like even with the talent that he gets every year, I still feel like he doesn't get the credit sometimes for putting together the teams he does with just a bunch of guys who've never played college basketball before.
yep,
I know they're always, NBA talent, but I still think that he does a great job with the situation that he has. So I'm sure he'll still find a way to have a top 10, 15 team somehow next year. But right now, if you're looking at it on paper, it looks potentially dicey for them.
yeah, somebody's going to be on the short end of the stick when it comes to minutes on the wing. But yeah, what you say about Calipari is spot on because, and you can see it over the course of a season. Like
Hmm.
even
Yeah.
just this past season, them losing to Evansville was like, oh, geez, this, raised a lot of questions. Oh, this Kentucky team, are they going to come together? And then, they had a big run in SEC play where they won a bunch of games and just like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, they're not going to have a problem. They're going to
They
be,
always do. They always
yeah,
put it together. I think even one of the worst seasons they've had in a long time was the year they had Julius Randle, and I think they were like a 9 seed play tournament in like 2014 or something, and they ended up going to the Final Four.
yeah.
So even in seasons where they're a little bit maybe more disappointing than others, they still find a way to be good by the end of the season.
Let's see here. The only other basketball thing I think I had was Pierre Brooks was a 2021 basketball recruit, traditional high school recruit that Missouri was in on and had offered, and he picked Michigan State, which was not a shocker because he's from Michigan. He had a Michigan and a Michigan State offer, so I had kind of already written this guy off as someone that was going to stay in his home state. So this wasn't a big shocker, and we're until I feel like there's an opportunity maybe to, and obviously this didn't come true with David DeJulius, but I felt like there was maybe a good idea in there somewhere to to be making contact with these guys, and when Michigan and Michigan State end up with all these players, and inevitably there's playing time issues or you know players getting recruited over, then maybe Missouri steps in and is like, hey, if you're looking to transfer, if they enter the transfer portal, then Missouri's there, and there's some familiarity with the staff or something like that. Now, obviously, that's not a sound recruiting strategy to be reaching out and making offers to guys on the off chance that they transfer. But I don't know. It seems like when so many players from Michigan end up at those two schools, then
Yeah.
inevitably a few are going to transfer every year.
Right. I mean, I understand your point. I mean, not like with how many transfers there are, you're gonna have like second rounds with a lot of different guys you recruited the first time around. So I mean, yeah, it doesn't hurt to shoot your shot with guys, and with the Michigan guys though, like we've talked about it, if they truly have an offer from Michigan or Michigan State, they just aren't leaving. At least
Yeah,
not the first time around. So
right. Yeah, it may take them a year to realize they don't want to be in Michigan anymore, but at least that, yeah, like you said, that first time around, they're going to stay in state. Let's see. I think that's basically all the news I had. Um, at least the basketball news you mentioned, and I did see this on Twitter that there was some 24/7 Sports crystal ball updates
Yeah,
to
just a
share.
couple football recruiting notes. We're pretty well acquainted with Travian Ford at this point. He's a defensive end from Lutheran North in St. Louis, and he's a 21 guy, 4-star. And yeah, so there were some crystal ball picks that were trending for Mizzou this week, and that would be a massive recruiting win for Missouri if they were able to land him. I've kind of honestly just counted him out. I don't know if counted him out is the right term, but just I was not going to be surprised if he went elsewhere because it just seems like he is so heavily recruited by so many different programs, so many great programs. So for Missouri to land him, it would be huge. I don't know if there's an announcement coming soon for him or anything like that, but definitely some crystal ball picks is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely. I mean, when Coach Drinkwitz talks about securing the borders and you know locking down the state of Missouri, this is the type of guy that would headline a recruiting class where you can point to in later seasons and say, hey, look, this guy, came out of St. Louis or stayed in state
Hmm.
and was really successful at Missouri, if everything goes
And
according to plan.
yeah, and historically, a guy that leaves the state and goes somewhere else.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
we got to keep Ohio State out of this recruitment because it seems like a lot of St. Louis guys go there.
I was going to say if he was a
Um,
wide receiver, I would definitely write him off because if they're, like if you look at the top 5 wide receivers in the state of Missouri every season, Missouri's lucky to get one of them.
yeah.
And it's not going to be the number one.
Hmm. Have you seen a lot of the former players kind of tweeting graphics and stuff and just saying that
Yes.
they appreciated their time at Missouri and stuff like that? I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's obviously getting retweeted and favorited by everybody, so it pops up on my Twitter feed nonstop. But yeah, that is very cool, and it's exactly, I mean, like what I'm talking about. What could be with Travion Ford is in later seasons you're pointing back to, and he would be one of those guys. So obviously, that's the pitch that the staff is making.
Right.
Look at these guys who came through and were successful and came out
Yeah.
of St. Louis, and that's going to be you next time. And he seems to really be enjoying the recruitment process. At least he likes the marketing team's graphics for not just Missouri. I saw one that was an NFL draft centered one. It was also kind of confusing because it was like a poker table with like poker chips and cards that Nebraska sent him that he tweeted out, and but then it was also like saying that he was getting drafted number one in the NFL draft, and I wasn't sure how those went together, but
Recruiting graphics are crazy, man.
yeah,
I don't even know. But
it was a cool graphic, but I just the logic of it I wasn't sure about, and I wanted an opportunity to like say something negative about Nebraska.
um, what was I gonna say? I don't even. Oh, okay, I remember. Um, I just think that the Missouri guys staying home and going to Missouri is such a I don't know a chance to be beloved by a program for a long time, and obviously that's not always what matters to players, nor maybe should it be what matters. But I think that is something that is a positive that you can pitch to people, and uh, probably the first guy that comes to mind, at least in recent years, is Drew Lock or Terry Beckner Jr. Guys from Missouri that were very, very highly recruited and ended up staying home. And I think that Missouri fans will remember and respect those guys for the rest of history. Guys that kind of just wrote their own story and stayed home. And there's Drew Lock right there. And I don't know. I think that there's something special about staying home and being successful for the home state school.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Coach Drinkwitz is able to land this type of recruit consistently, then it's a whole different ball game for Mizzou football.
Hmm.
If he's successful, I mean, we've talked about it with the Mizzou fan base has joked about this with every coach, in recent memory that oh, they come in, they say they're going to lock down the state of Missouri, and players are going to want to play for the home state school. But if one of these coaches was actually able to, and Terry Beckner Jr. and Drew Lock, those were both Gary Pinkel recruits, and we saw what happened with the Tiger 10 with Barry Odom, and he found a little bit more traction later in his coaching career at Missouri. But man, the recruiting classes that are possible just blow everything that Barry Odom did out of the water.
Yeah.
I mean, every year, if you just look at the top players in the state of Missouri, they're going to Ohio State, Texas, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, sometimes all in the same season.
Yeah, and sometimes there's just nothing you can do about that. I think just no matter who is Missouri's coach, you're going to have those top level guys go elsewhere. Sometimes that's just what happens. But if you can just keep some of them, and the Tiger 10, it'll just be something that we kind of always look back on as, I don't know. It was at the time it was super disappointing, super swing and a miss. Daniel Parker Jr. being the only one that stayed, and he's been a good player. And some of those players have gone on to do great things, and some of them haven't done as much. But um, that was a stressful recruiting season because we just put so many resources into those 10 guys, and just
Not
kind of all spurned
not
us.
dissimilar from the 2020 basketball recruiting class.
Yeah, it's true, honestly.
That Tiger 10 in football is one. Those are guys that I always look back. I'll look and see if I happen to see a box score for, USC or Oklahoma. I'm looking for those names that I know were part of that recruiting class, and that's going to be the same way next year in college basketball for Caleb Love, Josh Christopher, and Cam Fletcher. I'm going to be, going over to Ken Palm and looking at, how their analytic numbers are doing, and I'll be keeping track of those teams. And it's a lot easier to do in college basketball because of resources like Ken Palm. But yeah, that Tiger 10 is one that where it's just kind of fascinating to keep an eye on those guys.
Yeah, it's just hard for players sometimes too to make a difference from the beginning in football teams. I think it just typically you don't play very much, your first year or two sometimes, and even when you are pretty highly recruited. But I definitely think the one guy, is Ronnie Perkins that will always look back. And I think that we knew at the time he was probably the number one priority of the Tiger 10, and he's been by far the best college player out of that group as well. But, I just don't know if there's anything you can do to stop him from going to Oklahoma. Oklahoma's just a top 5 college football program ever in the country. They
and
just sometimes
on top of the game currently.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. That, like I said, we were disappointed at the time, but sometimes I don't know what you can do. But I definitely do think that Coach Drinkwitz has kind of brought an attitude that I think will be harder to turn away. I think he is a dynamite recruiter, at least he's showing it initially. So I'm definitely excited to see what he can do in the state of Missouri.
Should we mention there was a kind of a newsworthy, many articles were written about it. You'll have to help me on the player's name, but it was a running back that was basically encouraged to transfer away from Missouri. And there was a lot of opinions going around about that in particular. And so I didn't have this down to talk about, but it just kind of popped into my mind. Maybe, we can just kind of give our thoughts on that. I'll let you go first if you want.
Yeah, that's Anthony Watkins, I think is his name. I'm double checking that. Yeah, Anthony Watkins was a running back from Texas. He put up crazy numbers in high school, and I was a little bit surprised that he wasn't more highly recruited than he really was, but he was definitely a guy that I was excited about at Missouri. And he didn't play very much his freshman year, which is, again, expected whenever, we've got some great running backs with Tyler Beatty and Larry Roundtree. But I guess, reports have come out recently that he was going to transfer. And then when given the chance to talk a little bit, he kind of came out and said that he was asked to leave. and that there wasn't really a spot for him anymore and stuff like that. So it's an interesting situation. It's definitely uh, not an ideal situation for either party. There's always two sides to a story, so we don't really know exactly what happened, but I'm sure that what he's saying is true, at least to some degree. We have some scholarship reductions that we had to make for the NCAA sanctions. Anytime you've got a new coaching staff coming in, sometimes there's just philosophical differences on how, maybe how a player fits into a scheme and stuff like that. So
Or just how
there's a
many of one
whole
position you want to carry.
right. There's a whole slew of things that could happen or could explain why there's not a spot for him anymore. But it's definitely not anything you like to see. A player feeling forced out. Being asked to leave whenever they don't, and then they hadn't planned to. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think that I'm not surprised by that. I mean, it's big business, unfortunately, and that's something that probably happens fairly often. But something you don't like to see happen to especially college kids.
Right. And when I first read the first article I read about it was, I think, on The Athletic. And um, I was kind of taken aback at first. Like, I really had to process what I was reading because hearing it from his point of view, it's kind of startling just how based on what he was saying, it seemed like there was some confusion, you know, that maybe the coaching staff weren't all on the same page. And they kind of had to maybe get their story straight between each other before they kind of followed up with him on what was going on. But, you know, I do think it's worth noting, I'm trying not to defend the coaching staff too terribly much, although, like you said, it is kind of just part of the game nowadays, and it has been for a really long time. It's worth noting that, according to the articles I read, he was going to be able to keep his scholarship to the university. But basically, he was getting cut from the team, which nobody likes getting cut from a team.
Yeah, I
Especially
mean,
when you were a scholarship player. So that's super
yeah,
disappointing. And then obviously the staff is going to encourage you to transfer, one, because that way you'd be playing football, which they assume you want to do. And two, if you transfer, then you're not using a scholarship. So it kind of goes hand in hand, but obviously it's better for the staff for him to transfer and not be using that scholarship, even though they weren't necessarily going to just take it away from him.
yeah. Obviously, we've known that there's going to have to be some reductions in scholarships. I had a feeling that we might see some guys transfer. Um, this isn't exactly how I thought it would happen, but again, I'm not super surprised. And I think that we currently sit at 80 or 81. I think we're one under what the limit is currently for scholarships with the 4 reductions we had to take for the sanctions. So that may mean we may have another late edition coming in, and I think that news may have come before they added the center from Rutgers, the graduate transfer. I'm not sure, but I think we may still see another late edition, like a graduate transfer or something like that, happen.
Perfect segue. You want to tell me about this graduate transfer? Or do you have
Oh yeah.
something else you want to bring up before that?
I actually completely forgot to write that down in my notes, which is funny. And I don't remember his name off the top of my head.
Well, talk about the other crystal ball, and I'll look up.
Okay, yeah, the other crystal ball that we got just recently, I think in the last 24 hours, was Taj Butts. He is a running back from DeSmet in St. Louis. Um, and he's not quite as highly recruited as Travian Ford, but definitely, still a guy that's being recruited by the Indianas and the Kentuckys of the world. So definitely still a Power Five, consistent with Power Five teams. So so that would be just another in-state guy that would be good to land, I think. So definitely some momentum on the recruiting trail. It seems like as of late.
Yeah, it's all very good news in the crystal ball. This is very off topic, but speaking of crystal ball, did you notice that Trey Jackson has a transfer crystal ball on 24/7 Sports? that has him 100%. That could just be one prediction to Mississippi State,
Yeah.
which why stay in the conference? I don't want to see him be really successful. I want to see him be very successful. That's the problem. I want him to be successful, but I don't want him to punish Missouri and make
Right.
us regret it year after year when we play them, sometimes
You know,
multiple times.
um, as recently even as like a couple years ago, I feel like there used to be some like restrictions on like inter-conference transferring and stuff like
You could
that. I
just
think
straight up block them. Yeah.
I think even when like JW3 was transferring, I feel like there was some kind of something that came up where Missouri was blocking him with certain schools or teams they were going to play in the next year or two or something like that.
Yeah, they blocked him from transferring to any school in the conference, plus anybody that was on their schedule for the next 2 seasons, which was quite a few schools compared
Which
to
is
zero.
something I yeah, which is something I feel like just doesn't really happen anymore because
No,
there's like so much public backlash whenever you block a student
right.
from going where they want to go, which is understandable. But yeah, so now we're probably gonna have to see Trey Jackson maybe twice a year for the next 3 years. Um, I saw some people on the internet that were like, I hope he burns us," and I don't know. Like I
Yeah.
said,
If
like you said, I hope that he's successful, but it's gonna be a bummer to see him potentially go off against us.
yeah, if he burns Mizzou by being a really good player, then fine. That's good for him. I don't necessarily want to see him like burn Mizzou by, you know,
In like a head-to-head matchup.
yeah, scoring 25 points and leading them to a win or something in Mizzou Arena.
That would be so sad.
Yeah, that would be sad. Kyle, the offensive line graduate transfer is named Michael Maietti.
Oh yes. Yeah, this is a nice addition for sure, especially since we're losing Tristan Colon Castillo. Um, I know that I should have looked up his name. I know that we have a guy who backed up Colon Castillo last year, who I think going to be a sophomore or junior this year, who will fight Maietti. How did you say his last name?
It's spelled Maietti.
Okay, so they will duel for the starting job at center, but definitely a great addition. And I think that he started a lot of games at Rutgers. So definitely a guy who just seems to be a consistent producer for sure.
Yeah, you can't have too much offensive line depth and adding a guy who has experience at the Division One level, Power Five conference. I will take it anytime,
Hmm.
pretty much
I
any
actually,
off season.
I actually think that he went somewhat viral for something he did last season where, and I remember seeing this after it happened, at the time this past fall, but I think it got brought back up whenever I guess they scored a touchdown or something, and so he was celebrating with his quarterback, and he got really excited and like literally like punched him in the face almost because he was like, so they were like just that's how he was celebrating. I guess he was trying to just like shove him or something, but he just literally punched him in the face pretty much. But
Well, I hope he
just
has lots of touchdowns to celebrate next season.
yeah, just go easy on whoever's quarterback, please.
Less violently, yeah. All right, Kyle, I think we've exhausted our news and any tangents we might be able to go on outside of the news. So, are you ready to talk about the 2020 NFL Draft?
Oh, absolutely. And in honor of my Kansas City Chiefs, I'm wearing my big red shirt, so with Andy
Mm-hmm.
Reid plastered on the front of it. So um, yeah, Missouri definitely has some guys who have a chance to get drafted. There's definitely two guys that will for sure be drafted. We just don't know exactly where. But the first guy I'm going to start out with is an obvious guy that will probably go on day two, and that's Jordan Elliott. He was graded as one of the best defensive tackles in the country this year by Pro Football Focus. Just watching Jordan Elliott, it's obvious that he has great lateral quickness, very agile feet. He's a great run stopper. I think he definitely has some room to improve in his pass rush. But one thing that he dealt with a lot this past year was just being focused. He was double teamed. He was very well respected by the opposing teams we played. So he was sometimes just taken out of plays because he was double teamed. Um, and so that's understandable. He'll probably play a lot more one-on-one situations in the NFL. Um, but I would predict that Jordan Elliott is a third round pick. I think he could go as high as a second rounder potentially, but more likely to probably be a third or fourth round pick.
Okay, so I told myself this year that whatever I felt with my heart, I was just going to use my brain and predict one round later, a full round later for every single player. And then, but I really, really wanted, I really think Jordan Elliott goes in the second round. So I'm just going to stick with it. I'm going to just
Speak it into
go.
existence.
I was so wrong last year on literally everybody. And now, I just really think Jordan Elliott's going to go in the second round.
You've been hurt, but you're ready to be hurt again.
Yeah. Last year was terrible.
It was.
I literally thought that like five guys were potentially going to get drafted,
Yeah.
and even the two that were, you know, uh, Drew Lock was. I mean, what pick was he overall?
42nd.
Yeah, and
We
I
thought he could
literally
be
thought
a top 10 pick.
I literally thought he was going to go 10th, and then Terry Beckner dropping all the way to the 7th round. I'm pretty sure I predicted 5th round when we did this last year. So
that will definitely not happen with Jordan Elliott. I can absolutely assure you of that. I mean, I've looked at a lot of mock draft stuff, and everybody has Jordan Elliott as a top 5, top 6 defensive tackle. So I can promise you he's not going to go later than like the 4th round. But I do think that he's good enough to go in the second round. I think he could be a starter for a lot of NFL teams. Within a year or two of him being in the NFL. But yeah, and I think another thing that's interesting about this year's draft is it's just that they're doing it online, and there's not they probably didn't get as much time with some of the more obscure guys from smaller schools and stuff. So I think it's possible that you see even a higher number than normal of Power Five conference guys go. So a year for Jordan Elliott and Alberto, this might be they might get drafted even higher than they normally would this year.
yeah, and I think I can only hope you're right, I guess, because I don't know. I just don't know, and I feel like I always get suckered in with the NFL draft and like with Jordan Elliott especially, just the stuff that I was seeing, like you mentioned from Pro Football Focus and some of the combine type stuff had me really excited for him, maybe even being a first rounder. So let's just say that I am tempering my expectations because I thought he was going to be a first rounder. So now I'm going to just like say, okay, more reasonably, he'll be a second rounder.
Yeah, I got you. The next guy I just mentioned him is Alberto. I think that he has probably the highest ceiling to be the best NFL player out of any of the Mizzou guys. I think he has a very wide range of possible outcomes, but I do think that he has the highest ceiling probably by far out of anybody from Missouri this season. Again, just watching Alberto play, it's very obvious he's a tremendous athlete. He has incredible speed and size. He ran like the fastest 40 time for a tight end in the last
4.49.
like the fastest tight end time in the last 15 years or something like that. So obviously he can do incredible things for how big he is. He constantly wins 50-50 balls in the end zone. He scored so many touchdowns at Missouri. I think he scored a touchdown every 4 or 5 receptions, which is just nuts. So obviously he's a huge target. I think some areas of improvement for him are clearly he's not a great blocker. He's pretty coverable in short underneath routes. We didn't see a whole lot of his route tree was not super expansive. He kind of could just outrun guys up the middle. And that's where we saw a lot of his receptions were just because he was wide open down the middle or wide open in the end zone. And so, I think that he needs to show that he can make tougher, more contested catches on shorter, more underneath routes. I think some scouts have definitely questioned his toughness and his willingness to play through pain because We saw him miss a lot of time at Missouri. He left a lot of games because he was injured. Um,
Yeah, his
sometimes,
durability is a pretty big question mark for me.
yeah, sometimes that's unavoidable, and sometimes it's a lack of toughness and willingness to play through pain. So I think that's a legitimate concern. And this is a guy who, again, I think I would not be shocked if he was a second round pick, and I wouldn't be shocked if he was a fifth round pick. I just have no idea where he's going to end up. So I'll just say he's going to be a third round pick.
Okay, I'm going to go with fourth round.
I think.
And go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No.
I think that if I have any reason to believe that he might go a little bit higher is because of the depth at the tight end position in this draft. A lot of the mock drafts I've seen, or a lot of the analysts or scouts that I've heard from, say that he's the second or third best tight end in the draft. So if a team's looking for a tight end, then maybe he goes a little bit higher. Maybe he goes in the second or third round. But again, it's going to be really tough to predict. I think where Alberto goes.
Yeah, I think I could see him maybe going to a team that has like a veteran tight end that's maybe, you know, I have probably mentioned before, I'm not sure on or off the podcast, that the NFL seems like it's really moving towards a two tight end system. It's becoming really popular. I mean, unless you have one of the standout guys like a Travis Kelce or George Kittle or something like that, then a lot of teams, and for a while now, have been utilizing the kind of, more traditional blocking tight end versus the more wide receiver like tight end.
Right.
So maybe I could see him going to a team that kind of has that stability of maybe like a more reliable tight end that you're not going to have to worry about how many games they miss. You're not going to have to worry about them, missing their blocks and stuff like that. And they can just maybe groom Albert O a little bit more into that side of the
Yeah.
ball and into that side of the position, and just right from the beginning use him just as a pure pass catcher and red zone target.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I'm not making a comparison here, but I do think that he fits the mold of a guy that the NFL is moving towards in the future for tight ends. That some of the, like you said, some of the most successful and notable tight ends. Travis Kelce, George Kittle, guys that are basically just big wide receivers. They can go out and run routes. And that's clearly something that Alberto is. He's just a big guy who can run super fast, and he's got decent hands. So I think he fits the mold of a guy that the NFL is moving towards for tight ends.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he could really set himself apart similarly to a George Kittle if he were able to develop. George Kittle sets himself apart by being an amazing pass catcher, but also doing the dirty work,
Yeah.
being one of the best blocking tight ends, the best blocking tight end in the NFL currently, in addition to, his success catching the ball. So if Alberto was able to develop that part of his game just a little bit, then he could set himself apart because of his athleticism and just his size and being, like I said, that red zone target.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with fourth round. That's really that making up. I'm tempering my expectations even more to make up for not doing so on Jordan Elliott.
That's understandable. The next few guys, I'm not. We may only have two guys drafted this year. I really don't know. I think there's a few guys that have a shot to go, in that sixth or seventh round. But the next guy I'm going to talk about is Cale Garrett. Had an incredible career at Missouri. He's tough as nails. He tore his pectoral muscle against Troy and played the rest of the game. Um, Obviously, the mental aspect of his game is tremendous. I think he's a great leader. You can see his ability to, see the blocks coming and avoid them. He can read the quarterback's eyes. He's not. His weaknesses are definitely, athleticism and, and his injury concern. How long is his rehab situation going to take with his torn pectoral muscle? But with some of his mental uh, abilities definitely kind of made up for what he lacked in athleticism. I think just knowing where to be all the time and being able to read the offense and know what they're going to do before they do it. I think he just put himself in the right position a lot of the times. But you can get by with that in college sometimes, but I definitely don't know how common that is at the NFL level. Obviously, it's happened where under you know under or below average athleticism you can play, but it doesn't happen as often in the NFL as it does in college.
Yeah, I mean, it's his instincts on the defensive side of the ball were just incredible. And he was the prototypical under recruited player that Missouri has been successful with, forever. Just getting a guy, getting him into the system, a guy that really just fits. He fits so perfectly what Barry Odom wanted to do on defense, and with just had like I said, the instincts to just know where to be all the time. And that little stretch he had his senior season before he got hurt, where he had multiple touchdowns and had like between he and Nick Bolton, they were just on an absolute tear for about a 3-game stretch there, where it got people really excited for the rest of the season because the defense looked like they were going to be able to actually put points on the board in most games, let alone prevent the other team from doing so. And it was so gutting when he went down with injury and we knew that he was gone for the rest of the season. And that
Yeah.
was sort of like the first domino to fall that sort of made the season be just downright disappointing and ultimately led to Barry Odom being fired. I mean, I think something that we overlooked because it happened so early in the season when we talked about last football season was if Cale Garrett doesn't get injured, there's a chance the defense, is good enough to win them a couple extra games. And
Yeah.
then,
It's possible
2
Barry Odom's
games.
still the coach at Missouri.
Yes.
If I think that's probably where you're getting. But I agree with you. I mean, a healthy Cale Garrett all season. Who
Yeah.
knows where Missouri's season goes? But um, yeah, that was one of the more painful things as a sports fan. Just that I can remember was just knowing Cale Garrett his career was done for sure.
Yeah.
But his career seemed to go so quickly. I remember with the day he flipped from Navy to Mizzou, and it was like really close to the end of the recruiting cycle. And man, I couldn't be happier that he made the move.
Yeah. I've got him as an undrafted free agent, though, probably signing on with the team, maybe even before the draft, like the night that the draft is complete.
Yep.
We'll probably see a tweet.
Yep, I'm gonna agree with you. I think he's gonna be an undrafted free agent. The next guy is Trevor Wallace-Sims. Again, a guy who had a great career at Missouri on the offensive line. He was pretty versatile. I think he played multiple positions, and I think that that's kind of something he's pitching himself on for the next level as well, is that he can play guard or tackle. Again, he was graded very well by Pro Football Focus, one of the nation's best pass protectors. So good footwork, pretty agile for his size. You know, I think that he's a guy who could sneak into the 7th round potentially. He's probably 3rd or 4th on my list of guys who will be drafted for Mizzou.
Yeah, I don't think I could predict anybody else to actually be picked. I do see some, free agent offers being taken on by these guys. Wallace Sims is just an interesting situation because he, just like the entire offensive line, was so much better his junior season.
Yeah.
And really struggled at times this past year. Kelly Bryant getting hurt didn't help that. Having to play with different quarterbacks didn't help at all. But it was just looked at in preseason as an absolute strength of this team. And they were going to be one of the better offensive lines in the SEC, if not the best, right up there at the top. And to see some regression pretty much across the board from the offensive line was another really disappointing part of last season, and another thing that led to, fewer wins and Barry Odom not sticking around. So I wonder. I don't remember if he had any draft buzz this time last year after his junior season, but I wonder if maybe he could have capitalized on it. A really successful season for that unit as a whole.
For sure, yeah, it's a good point. And he actually was kind of graded out as a sixth, seventh round pick last year, this time last year. So I actually do think his draft stock went down by him coming back, which is probably not common. But yeah, we there was some weird regression on the offensive line for Missouri this year, and just weren't as good on the ground. Um, and yeah, it was a little almost unexplainable at times why that happened. But do you have anything else you want to add on Sims?
No, I think undrafted free agent as well. I still right there with Cale Garrett though. I think we'll see something. We'll see him attached to a team pretty much immediately after the draft is over.
Yeah. I would say the next guy on my list that probably has the best chance to be drafted is probably Yasir Durant, and he played left tackle for Mizzou for the last 2 seasons, I believe. Again, a guy who had a very, very good year 2 seasons ago, was fine this past year. But I would say pretty much everybody we talk about from here on out is probably undrafted free agent, maybe sneaking into the seventh round. Maybe one of these guys sneaks into the seventh round, but
Yeah.
um, I just the rest of the list I have Yasir Durant, Jonathan Johnson, Kelly Bryant, Tristan Colon Castillo, and DeMarcus Acey. Like I would say all of those guys had great Mizzou careers. And Jonathan Johnson's like, one of the highest yardage of any Mizzou receiver we've ever had.
Yeah.
DeMarcus Acey, just tremendous, last year or two at cornerback. So and he's versatile.
Another injury that really affected the team down the stretch.
Yeah. So I could see any number, any one of these guys maybe sneaking in to the seventh round, but I would say probably all or most of them being undrafted free agents.
Yeah, AC was one that, I really preseason I would have put him ahead of probably, obviously not Jordan Elliott or Alberto, but I probably would have had DeMarcus Acey ahead of Cale Garrett and Yasir Durant as far as most likely to get drafted.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't seem like he did anything to really warrant not staying, in that on that draft bubble. So I don't know what the scouts didn't like about his senior season, maybe that I just didn't really pick up on, but it seemed like Missouri's defense was way better when he was on the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's definitely a guy that Missouri's going to miss next year. That'll definitely be a big role that Jarvis Ware or Adam Sparks will have to jump up and fill for sure. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't really know a lot about his draft prospects and why his stock probably fell a little bit. But I do think he's a versatile option. He can play quarterback or safety. So if these teams have really done their research, deep into these prospects, it's very possible that a team jumps up and gets them in the seventh round or something like that.
I think we've talked about before how maybe the coronavirus and teams not being able to do as much in-person scouting and do interviews in person and stuff like that might actually help Kelly Bryant because he's just such a known figure, a known quantity as far as college quarterbacks, because he's been in the spotlight with Clemson and he was high profile graduate transfer. Everybody knew what was going on with him and Mizzou. Seems like following a trend here of players that got injured at some point and last season and kind of really messed up Mizzou's chances of winning a couple more games. So I could see a team maybe signing him, just wanting him to be a backup. And I don't think I want to say like scout team to like replicate some mobile quarterbacks that teams might be facing, but I don't know. I think there's you wouldn't need as big of a name as Kelly Bryant to be a scout team quarterback. I could see him actually just, competing in that third string or backup role for a team.
Yeah, I really haven't heard any buzz at all about him in this year's draft. But you make a good point that seems to be kind of the direction the NFL is going, at least right now with quarterbacks. Is a lot of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now are mobile quarterbacks that can hurt you on the ground or through the air. And that's something Kelly Bryant can do. Obviously, not at the level that we've seen in the NFL, but someone that could maybe emulate a Russell Wilson or a Patrick Mahomes, or somebody that can move around and not, it doesn't just sit in the pocket and hurt you to the air. So yeah, maybe there's some appeal for like you said, having Kelly Bryant, kind of play scout team or fight for that third or fourth string quarterback job.
Yeah, I don't see him getting drafted. I think, a real pessimist would argue that maybe he was exposed a little bit at Mizzou, that he kind of showed that he wasn't, really a quarterback that could just kind of take over and lead his team to a win without the supporting cast that he had at Clemson. Obviously, there was a step down in that department when he came to Mizzou. So a pessimist would say that kind of showed that he's not quite the quarterback that we thought he was at Clemson. But I could still see a team taking a chance on him as a free agent.
Yeah, I think we'll see all of these guys probably end up in some kind of free agent deal. I really would be surprised if any of these guys just didn't get
Right.
didn't get on a roster in any way or something
At
like
least
that.
at least for training camp, for sure.
Yeah.
And probably beyond for most of them.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Anybody that just there was possibility earlier in their careers and they just completely fell off? I don't know. I don't have anybody in mind, but I was trying to think if there was anybody that just man, what happened to him? It seems like all these guys were we knew they were going to be a big part of their senior season. So,
yeah, I know nobody really comes to mind in that way, but I would probably say of all the guys, the guy that probably has the least chance to be drafted is probably Jonathan Johnson. But I just still appreciate so much what he did at Missouri, and again, a guy who I can remember the day he committed, and he had an absolutely fantastic career, and he got to play with Drew Lock for probably 3 of those years, so that definitely helped those stats, I'm sure, as well. But
right.
and he had a great combine as well. He put up some incredible numbers on the 40-yard dash and the shuttle run drill they do and stuff. So clearly amazing athlete, and we'll definitely appreciate his contributions that he made at his time at Missouri.
Definitely. I think that's all I got on any of these guys. So unless you got something else, I think that's the entire episode.
I think that is a wrap. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're on Twitter at Mizzou Sports Pod, and you can email us at MissouriSportsPod@gmail.com. We're on Instagram. We're on YouTube. We are everywhere you could possibly find a podcast.
You almost infringed on Visa's trademark. Everywhere you want to be, or something like that. Yeah, find us on all those places. If you are listening on a podcast service, it'd be very helpful. We'd really appreciate it if you gave us a review or a rating. And likewise on YouTube, if you could subscribe or give us a like or leave a comment. Any of those things are very much appreciated. And thanks everyone for listening. We will see you next week.